fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planting information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually, the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over a cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament,
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be on the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, They get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show, but if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, one of the 4 principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbunda women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort. Totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Wednesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
We've got a very busy show for you on this Wednesday because in just a few days, the United States Congress is set to hold their hearings on UFO disclosure. You might laugh, you might smirk, you might chuckle, but we now have confirmed that there are at least 3 major whistleblowers coming forward with evidence. Members of Congress have actually seen footage, seen evidence, and will also be testifying and releasing that information. So next week is going to be absolutely explosive.
Plus, we have an update on a story about how trans people are treated in the military. They can get exempt from deployments. They can get full sex changes on taxpayer dollars, and they can get exemptions from physical fitness standards. Is this good for them, or will this actually hurt their bodies? A point that we've been making all along.
And the military, but we'll talk about it in the story. Yeah. We're also going to talk about what the future of the GOP looks like because, well, Tucker Carlson basically just eviscerated the entire GOP field in a series of interviews. We're going to go through a lot of them and what Donald Trump is now saying as of this hour about the war in Ukraine. So it's a really interesting back and forth with what Trump is saying today versus what the rest of the GOP field is saying on war and how the United States needs to be in a perpetual state of war. So we'll have all of that and more as Redacted starts right now. Welcome, everybody, to the big show. Hope everyone's doing well on this Wednesday. Hope you're having a good summer. Now we're into the dog days of summer. Let me know what you guys are doing traveling-wise. Are you guys able to actually get some downtime? Are you traveling? Tell us where you're joining us from around the world as well. Drop us a note here in the chat. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're watching you live on YouTube. We're watching you live on Rumble. And good to see everybody here.
And if you're in this heat wave, let us know how hot it is where you are because I'm feeling sticky.
Well, like I know in Italy, it's what they've got this massive heat wave.
It's 45 there, which is upwards of 110 if you're a Fahrenheit person. That's really hot. And Italy, a lot of places, they don't have air conditioning. The one thing Europe doesn't do as well as the United States does is bug screens. What's with that?
Bug screens and air conditioning.
Yes. Yeah. It's just not that big of a deal. The bug screens and... why Europe? Why? So
I could maybe do without the A, but not air conditioner, but not bug screens. If there's bugs, I don't want them.
Yeah, no way. I can't say. I need to have some good air conditioning. I can't handle it. Like sleeping in a I can't deal with it. I can't deal with it. She loves it. She loves it, but that's how it usually goes.
We spent a summer in a really hot in Italy one summer, and the bugs just ate me to death because Clayton was keeping the windows open because there was no air conditioning. So either we sweat to death or I get eaten alive. And he's like, you're fine.
Yeah.
Leave the windows open.
Like, you just get eaten because there's no way I'm dying in this heat. This is ridiculous. Anyway, we've got a busy show for you on this Wednesday. So we do have a newsletter. We want to tell you about this newsletter. If you go to redacted.inc, sign up for the daily newsletter. We publish it first thing in the morning. We try to be as short and sweet as possible. So you can read it in about 5 or 10 minutes over your cup of coffee. So go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and then you'll receive a welcome email from me, which is Clayton at redacted.inc. Just got to move us over to your VIP folder so it doesn't get buried in there or in your spam folder or something like that. That's usually what happens. In fact, Gmail labeled us as dangerous, labeled our newsletter as dangerous. Which, it's not dangerous. We just cover the actual news that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know about.
Well, thinking is dangerous.
Yeah, I guess thinking is dangerous. So if you're a Gmail client or if you use Gmail, it might, when you sign up for the newsletter, it might flag it as dangerous and it might move it over into your spam folder. So just be aware of that. But anyway, go to redacted.inc is the place to go to sign up there. And then also, if you subscribe to the show here, your name will pop up on the big board. We just passed 2 million subscribers. We're making our way towards 2.1 million subscribers now, if you can believe that.
Yes, I can believe that, and it feels great. I was hoping while Clayton was gone to just make a big leap from 2 to 3 million so that I could brag about it while you were gone. It didn't happen. I guess we need this guy.
Yeah.
So I'm glad for that, at least.
Yeah.
You know, I can dream. I can dream about you.
All right, you guys good with the clicking around? David, is everything good on the...
Yep, everything's good. I was just adjusting my color. I look like an Oompa Loompa.
Okay.
Wait, can we see it? You can't
Not
say
anymore.
that.
I just look. It's still. I still look really.
It's dark.
Blue, you look like a Smurf.
Yeah.
Papa Smurf.
I don't know what's going on.
Papa Smurf in there.
Look like
Papa
what was the girl that ate the blueberry?
Farouk Assault.
That was Violet.
No, that was Violet.
No,
Yeah.
Violet. Yeah,
You're turning Violet. Yeah, that's right.
What's a Scottish midgie? What's a midgie?
Those are the little bugs.
Oh, yeah.
They almost look like tiny little fairy. Yeah.
I didn't have that problem when I was in Scotland.
You never do. They don't eat you. They only eat me and our youngest Eve.
Yeah, the other ones are fine. All right, let's get to your top story. All of Washington, D.C. is obsessed with war. All of the mansions around Washington, D.C. are built on the backs of war contracts and the war contractors. All of the wealth that flows through Washington, D.C. Is because of war and big pharma. And so if you are an anti-war presidential candidate, you stand no chance of being elected. And the deep state will not let you win. They control the purse strings. They control the donors. They control the intelligence apparatus. If you are pro-peace, you will not become president. I mean, that's the thing. If you're a pro-peace candidate in 2023, 2024, you will not become president. They will not let you become president.
I don't like you just saying that because I'm holding out hope for the next election.
You can have all the hope you want, but we'll follow the money. I mean, let us know in the chat if you believe, if you're a pro-peace candidate, you stand a chance of winning. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
You're being very pessimistic about it.
But I've been around and I know a thing or two. And so I'm just, I'm pessimistic based on past history of these clowns. So that's why virtually every Republican presidential candidate supports sending more weapons and money to Ukraine. Or if not directly to Ukraine, then, to the South China Sea in order to provoke a war with China. We'll send it to the Philippines, maybe not necessarily Ukraine. It's the same thing, just a different enemy. Doesn't really matter. It's just another boogeyman that they can send money to. Now that Ukraine has lost this war, it might make sense to start talking about peace. Now, what's left over the past 24 hours, Putin and Russia have launched a devastating series of attacks against Odessa and targets there. Of course, this was the exact area where the Crimean Bridge attack was launched from. So they're taking out pieces of Odessa, which that's game over if they take Odessa for Ukraine. So now would be a good time to start talking about peace. But instead, the Biden administration is doubling down this morning on more war. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says we need to build a future force for Ukraine for long-term security. So now we're not just nation building. We're now going to build a long-term military for Ukraine. What does that mean exactly? In other words, send more money, weapons, and troops to Ukraine. Here's the secretary trying to explain this.
First, on the agreement with Ukraine, we can expect, and you saw evidence of this with the G7 announcement at the end of the Vilnius summit, we can expect that countries will execute bilateral agreements with Ukraine going forward, and certainly we will as well. And that's a work in progress. But I would tell you, our part of that, the chairman and I are focused on not only making sure that Ukraine has what it needs to be successful today, but we also have to make sure that they have a capability to defend themselves in the future and to deter aggression in the future. So while we're doing what's necessary to make sure that they can be successful today, we're also going to have to work with allies and partners to build a future force, and so that's a hard work that's got to happen. And right now we're kind of at that point where we're doing both simultaneously. So you see that in some cases we've invested in some things that because they have to be produced, they won't materialize until a couple of months down the road, or in some cases a year down the road. But those kinds of things help provide the capability that Ukraine's going to need in the future.
Oh, okay.
Ukraine has everything they need to succeed, which is an invitation to peace talks.
Yeah. That's your ticket. That's your winning ticket, the golden ticket.
That they do have what they need to succeed right now already. It would cost nobody another cent, except maybe just a plane ticket to Turkey or China or Saudi Arabia or whoever is willing to host it. That exists already.
On top of all the money we've already sent them, we're paying their pensions and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like we're paying for health care for the Zelensky's people. Like we're helping them with their economy while ours suffers.
Yeah.
Oh, well, don't worry. We're giving our military sex changes on taxpayer dollars, and we're going to talk about that next. Yeah. So we're taking care of ours too.
Well, I don't know about that because Ben Shapiro says that one thing doesn't have to do with the other. Like our economy in the United States is crumbling. Poverty is rampant in the United States. Giving money to Ukraine has nothing to do with the poverty in the United States. So that's what Ben Shapiro said today, which I found it interesting. That was a very interesting way to put it. I don't agree with it at all, but I found that was interesting. That's the Democratic side, which used to claim. So that was the Democrats there. We saw Lloyd Austin there, which used to claim to be the party of peace, anti-war. Not anymore. They are pro-war. And Republicans are right there with them. The neoconservatives that run the party are also running for president, and they very much do not want this war to end. The only difference between Democrats and Republicans on Ukraine is how quickly weapons are being sent there. That's the only difference. Republicans believe that Biden has been slow. This is the argument you're hearing, right? That Biden has been slow and that we should be sending them more and way faster. And Biden says we're sending them fast enough. That's it. There's almost zero daylight between Democrats and Republicans on this issue. Tucker Carlson just dismantled the Republican Party on one neocon after the next. We're going to show you a few of those clips in just a moment. But first, if you're looking for a pro-peace candidate right now, you'll be hard-pressed to find one. The only one that the GOP side that is actually calling for peace is about to face another round of criminal indictments for the January 6th protest. Donald Trump says he will be arrested and indicted for that. Say what you want about him. You can say whatever you want about him. He's the only one that's been calling for immediate peace. And naturally, they're doing anything they can, of course, to make sure and stop him from becoming president again. The deep state in the United States will not, under any circumstances, allow a pro-peace candidate becoming president. They just won't. Or staying president for very long if you are pro-peace and you want to end a war. Just ask JFK.
Well, if you look at the trajectory of this war, went really well under Obama, and then really it plateaued under Trump. They weren't able to make much ground, so they needed him out so that they could ramp it back up under Biden.
Yeah, because he was, friendly with Putin. He's like, we're not going to go to war with. Why are we going to war with Russia?
So the neocons that were dragging us towards a war with Putin over Ukraine did so well during the Obama administration that they continued to escalate, and then they were thwarted under the Trump administration. So no matter what you think of President Trump, he was not willing to escalate with Russia over Ukraine.
So here is Trump last night on Hannity revealing the dirty lies that the media in Washington, D.C. are telling about this war. Listen.
So they finished with the rockets You have cities with no buildings standing. It looks like just a demolition zone. It's so horrible.
Sad.
And and then they'll say 2 people were hurt. No, hundreds of people and thousands of people were killed. You're going to find out when this whole thing is over that the number of people killed is far greater than they tell you. They're not telling you the truth. Many, many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are dying. These cities are being obliterated. And basically they say, what's your stance? Are you for Russia or are you for... I'm for one thing very simple. I want to stop people from getting killed, and I'll have it stopped fast.
Take a break. We'll come back.
Yeah, and well, I should, and that's true. And also, Vivek Ramaswamy is also pushing for this. But again, this is how these guys. You cannot have a pro-peace president.
Yes, but I think he seems to want a war with China.
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yes, so I'm not going to put him all the way into the peace category.
I'm not really into the Ukraine thing, but let's go to war with China. That sounds like a good idea. So again, it's like moving these pieces around on a chessboard. It's like, okay, well, no, I'm very much anti the Ukraine war, but China. So you have to be very, very careful here because it's just a redistribution of this war money into a different enemy, and that's what it's all about. Here, Tucker pushes Nikki Haley on why the GOP is mysteriously quiet on Biden's bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline. Watch.
Well, speaking of energy in the military, who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline?
I mean, I don't know.
I'm not claiming you did it. No. I'm just kidding. No, I don't know. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Do you know who did it?
Seems pretty obvious it was backed by the Biden administration, I would say. I mean, I think all the evidence suggests that, but I wasn't there. I guess what I'm really saying is if you were running against the Biden administration, to do something like that and shaft our closest allies in the world, which would be Western Europe, and deprive them of the energy they need to run their manufacturing sector and destroy their economy, which it is in the process of doing, like, that's a major sin to have done something like that. You just betrayed our allies, and no one on the right is accusing the Bidens of what they clearly did. So I don't know why.
So
she looks exasperated to be asked about this.
Can't even answer. Like, you would think that you would be incredibly critical, right? If you were running against it, you would absolutely be out there saying the Biden administration blew up the Nord Stream, but there's not a peep about it. There's no discussion about it.
No, but
is that Sun Tzu that's like never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake?
Yeah.
You know, it's like you'd think they would be like, hey, you know, like look at this. Like he just clearly handed them like this huge talking point, and they're just like, nope,
we're not going to even touch it. We're not going to even touch it. You just bombed the Nord Stream pipeline. You just, really destroyed the economies of your closest allies in Europe. No discussion about it. No one's mentioning it.
No, but she's giving long orations that are anti-China. That is her. She's totally willing to go full in on anti-China and say how she's been warning about how they're bad news all along. Well, this is an obvious one. This is a gimme because this is a war that's happening, not the one you're stoking.
So many of these other candidates are also anti-China and they're anti-Russia. Here's Asa Hutchinson on why it's more important to send troops to the Philippines than to protect our own borders. Listen to this.
So we have U.S. military personnel in over 100 bases around the world. The president, as you saw yesterday, mobilized some reserves to support the effort against Russia in Eastern Europe. Why wouldn't you use uniformed, and maybe, I mean, you ran the agency, so you may know the answer, and I'm ignorant, but why wouldn't you just create a human wall of American military personnel and just kind of fix the problem immediately? We could afford to do that. We don't want to do that for some reason. What am I missing?
Well, a couple points there. First of all, the military is always an option that might be needed at some point. But I want to be able to fix it without having to use
the military. How about when 7 million people come in? Is that the point?
I would like to be able to do it without using the military for a couple of reasons. First of all, we want to show strength with China and making sure we have a military presence in the Philippines. We want to make sure that we show strength in Europe and that we're able to maintain a military that has a global presence.
Okay, so making sure we have troops in the Philippines and show China our resolve. But our southern border, that's totally fine. Just leave it wide open. No concern at all for that.
We do have a new military base in the Philippines.
Yeah. Oh, two. We have two new ones.
Yeah.
In the Philippines.
That's a check mark.
Yeah, we've already got that. But we need to send more. Make sure we've got more people there. So Asa Hutchinson, again, falling right in line with the rest of the GOP, and then just another, perhaps the most explosive in all of this, Mike Pence. So former Vice President Mike Pence falls back on the Republican talking point, which says that President Biden hasn't sent weapons to Ukraine fast enough. It's like that's what we're arguing here. He hasn't sent F-16s there. He hasn't sent F-35s there. Why is Biden dragging his feet on this? Like, this is the debate that we're having. If he were president, he would do it much more efficiently. And then this happened. Watch.
We're saying maybe January we'll let somebody transfer some jets.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President. Have you? I know you're running for president. You are distressed that the Ukrainians don't have enough American tanks. Every city in the United States has become much worse over the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Drive around. There's not one city that's gotten better in the United States. And it's visible. Our economy has degraded. The suicide rate has jumped. Public filth and disorder and crime have exponentially increased. And yet, your concern is that the Ukrainians, a country most people can't find on a map, who've received tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars, don't have enough tanks. I think it's a fair question to ask, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern. Tucker, I've heard that routine from you before, but that's not my concern. I'm running for president of the United States because I think this country's in a lot of trouble. I think Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad.
So that's not my concern. So you could look at that a couple of different ways, right? Tucker, that's not my concern because I'm above that and I can walk and chew gum at the same time. That's one way to look at it, right? Another way to look at it is I don't give a rat's ass about the American cities because I'm more concerned about what's happening in Ukraine. So as some are saying, no, he clearly doubled down on it and said, that's not my concern. American cities are not my concern. This is not my concern. Well, I think the way that I'm reading it is he thinks he can walk and chew gum at the same time. I can send as many tanks and jets to Ukraine efficiently as I possibly can, and I can totally take care of America. That's what I think he was trying to walk back later and say.
Yeah. The first time I watched this, I thought he was saying Ukraine is not my concern. But no, he absolutely is.
No, because he doubled down on it and Tucker gave him another chance to say it. So it's not my concern. I mean, you could say it reminded me a little bit of that German politician when asked about okay, Germany's collapsing. Do you not care about your German constituents? And she said, I know I care more about Ukraine. I don't, German voters they're fine. I don't care about them. I care more about Ukraine. And that's what this reminded me of. This reminded me of this moment where, no, I don't care that Philadelphia is literally swimming in filth and there's murders multiple times a day in big cities all across the United States. I care more about making sure that we get jets into Ukraine.
Yeah, it's such a charade. It's a polished turd.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that he gets to keep doing this because I love the fact that because you notice what Pence did after he asked him the question, he goes to his stump speech. I'm going to take America and I'm going to make it this and this and this. And Tucker doesn't let him keep going. And that's what happens in every debate we've ever watched. All this stuff, they just go right in their stump speech and they never challenge him. I love that he's like, no, wait, and he challenges him. So I hope that this is setting the bar for the debates that we'll see throughout the election cycle.
Right.
Yeah, I wonder if Tucker will do debates, if they'll, because
let him host one for a
because the
network.
mainstream media, who's going to let him do it?
Awesome.
I mean, if he does it for his own, he's launching his own new media company. I'd love
Unless
to see him
there
do that.
was a Twitter debate, which I don't think any Democratic candidate would participate in because they're too busy, crapping on Twitter.
So then he asked Mike Pence, as a Christian, why are we supporting a country and a leader in Ukraine like Zelensky, which has arrested priests, nuns, persecuting Christians in Ukraine? Why are we supporting that? And but it didn't go well. Watch this.
You recently met with Zelensky, according to news reports. And I'm wondering if during that meeting, as a prominent Christian leader, which you are in addition to your political views, you broached the question of his treatment of Christians within Ukraine. The Zelensky government has raided convents, arrested priests, has effectively banned a denomination, a Christian denomination, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, within Ukraine has persecuted Christians, and I wonder if you raised that with him.
I did raise the issue when we were there, and I raised it with the leader of the Orthodox Church when I was visiting Kyiv, and asked him about concerns about religious liberty. He assured me that the Zelensky government in Ukraine was respecting religious liberty. Even he believed that the Zelensky government was respecting religious liberty. And I must tell you, other than the sanctity of life, there's no higher priority in my life than preserving the freedom of religion in America and championing religious liberty around the world.
I'm confused. On this question, it's very clear that the Zelensky government has arrested priests for having views they disagree with. That's not consistent with religious liberty. It's an attack on it, and we're funding it. And I'm just wondering how is it, and I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but I sincerely wonder how a Christian leader could support the arrest of Christians for having different views.
Well, what I can tell you is I asked the Christian leader in Kiev if that was in fact happening, and he assured me that it was not. And I believe that it is in the interest of the United States of America to continue to give the Ukrainian military the resources that they need to repel the Russian invasion and restore their sovereignty.
Would you, may I ask, would you be, and I believe you have a good faith position on this, and we have disagreements on it, but I want to just, I can't let you elide over the question of the treatment of Christians and clergy.
I know, I heard
and
that
would
again.
you be, well, no, but hold on, would you be
Problem is you don't accept my answer. I just told you that I asked the religious leader in Kiev if it was happening. You asked me if I raised the issue, and I did.
And I'm saying
I also raised it with the Ukrainians, and I was told that there are religious leaders who have been working with the Russian military that is murdering people by the thousands.
Okay.
I mean, Tucker, look.
Wait, but hold on. Don't you think...
Let me explain to you what I think our national interest is there.
I would think you would have greiter concern for religious liberty in Ukraine. And I'm surprised by your
I told you I raised the issue of religious liberty.
No, you spoke to one person who's clearly on one side of it, and there are many, many news reports that are not disputed by anybody that many clergy have been arrested in Ukraine. And I'm merely saying I may not agree with their views. I'm not Russian Orthodox, but you can't arrest clergy for having different views, period. Because if you do, you violate the basic tenet of religious liberty.
I won't, look, I want to be clear with you. I won't stand by it. I won't stand for it.
Oh, okay.
That's an anecdote.
But I talked to one person. I talked to one guy who's like a high level, Zelensky religious,
One anecdote is not data.
I talked to Zelensky, who promised me they're not doing this, and that's it. You talked to one guy.
I just remember, like in college, you get that class where like the professor would be like, they like lay out some statistic. They'd be like, like 87% of people do this, and somebody chime in and be like, that's not true because my cousin did this and it happened the other way.
Yes.
And it's like, oh yeah, okay, my bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your cousin,
one guy.
Yeah. Exactly. I remember I went to see Jerry Seinfeld do stand-up one time in Philadelphia, and he was making fun of the post office, and he was like doing jokes about how painfully slow it is to go to the post office. And somebody yelled out, "You're not funny." He goes, "Oh, are you a postal employee?" And the guy said, "Yes." And everyone just lost it. He's like, "Oh, so I'm sorry, sir. We found the one, not at your post office. Your post office is the only efficient post office. I'm sorry, sir." It was just a hilarious back and forth. But the anecdote, like this guy got pissed that his one post office was the anecdote of it. Yeah.
Do you think, I want to know this, like, do you think Pence, when he decided he was going to run for president, actually thought he had a chance? Do you think he sat there and thought, I think I really have a chance to be president. Yeah. I'm going for this.
Yeah. I do, because I think that he thinks that he can maybe run on the appetite for January 6th as like, I'm one of them who stood up against January 6th. He thinks he's a hero of it. And also he's very comfortable, for instance, when pushed on his fundamental religious beliefs, he was pushed a lot on sort of the more salacious details of Donald Trump's life. And he's very used to, like he did in this video, he sort of raises his chin and looks away. Like, I'm above that question, and I will say words that make it go away.
Yeah.
And that's
if you read
how it works.
If you read Bob Woodward's reporting on Trump, and you realize, like, you really realize what Pence was. Pence was there just to ride the coattails, just to make his way into the White House in this way, plucked from obscurity in Indiana to be taken in there. He really looked at, was looking at this as a total opportunity. And I think that's exactly it. He can play the, I'm the good Christian Republican, don't vote for Trump. He's the troublemaker, so I'm going to run against him now. And that's the strategy.
Like this is the Trump administration, but without the controversy.
Yeah. So
that's what you'll get. Yeah, I'm sure he really is suffering from extreme disillusions.
I want to play one more because I think this is, the Pence one was bad. But perhaps worst of all, actually, was Tim Scott. And I say that because it's the clearest example that the GOP has no idea what a victory would look like in Ukraine. And what's the end game for us there? To send hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine and have hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians killed at the hands of NATO. He starts off by asking him if he supports sending cluster bombs to Ukraine, and he can't give any kind of a straight answer at all about that. Tim Scott says that he wants peace. So Tucker says, well, why not force a peace agreement like we already had in place before, and then it was scuttled because the United States got in its way? Why don't we force a peace? We have the power to do that. We can absolutely do that. We can put fake governments in place, puppet governments. We can actually force a peace if we want it. And Tim Scott said, well, how do you do that? I have no idea. Watch this.
The Third World War very quickly. So why not force a peace?
How would you do that?
Well, you could tell Ukraine, and they are a client state of the United States. Without American backing, there's kind of no Ukraine. We're literally paying the salaries of their bureaucrats. We want you to sit down, as they tried to do, but were stopped by our government, and stop this war. And reach a peace as one does, where both sides, concede some of their interests. Like, why wouldn't that be in our interest to do that?
I think the faster we get to peace, the better off we are. What we don't want to do, from my perspective, is allow ourselves to ask for a premature peace that cannot be achieved as the alliances continue to come together. To the extent that we can find our path out of this situation, the better off we are.
What? So what's the point at which we'll know that we've achieved our goal? And I say that within the context of having watched 20 years of occupation in Afghanistan, where nobody could answer the question, what's the point? Yes. And no one in Congress ever asked that question, amazingly. So what is the specific goal here?
Yeah, so I would say that the objective should be for Zelensky and Ukraine to be able to achieve victory by maintaining as much of their territory as they possibly can, and then seeing the resources that we've deployed, along with our Western alliances, achieving the peace that I believe comes when you get these two folks to sit down and have a conversation that allows them to determine where those lines will be drawn for the next 100 years.
Yeah, that's called a word salad.
That's how you talk if you only read CNN.
Or watch CNN.
Right.
Yeah, maybe read CNN. Yeah, we're going to bring together our allies in the world. And that's how, and then Zelensky at the table and taking back and making sure they can have their land, and our alliance is together. And then we advance in that alliance, and then we have land and Zelensky and alliance. And what the hell are you talking about? What does that even mean? I have no idea what you're talking about. It was a total word salad.
I can't tell you.
You're running for president of the United States. One of the most important questions of our time right now is, will we go to World War III with Russia? Will we actually put boots on the ground? President Biden's doing that. 3,000 reservists being called up to deploy to Europe, sending more weapons and more quickly, and developing a future force for Ukraine. I mean, what could be more important?
Sorry, I bumped a voice effect. That's the thing that really bothers me about these people, is they can say this word salad because nobody ever challenges them on it. So they'll say their word salad, and then their team comes out the next day. Well, what he really meant was, after they have time to put it through their PR spin and what he was really trying to say. But that's the thing, not letting them just say those word salad things and putting pressure on them. We see who they really are, and these people don't know what the hell they're talking about.
And they'll be clamped down further. You're right about that, because as we tighten the field, there'll be less of these events, and they'll be just much more handled and focused. And you won't get to have these questions. You won't get to have the sort of free-form, conservative political action committee discussions, free-form flowing conversations. It'll be much more controlled environment. And we won't get these moments. You'll have the much more robotic Mike Pence, and dodging questions, not answering the questions, and it'll be more of this crap. But this is your GOP field right now. This is what you've got. They've got one guy who, whatever you think of him, he's going to be handed a new pile of indictments, and he's pro-peace in Ukraine specifically. And he was defending Xi Jinping, saying like he doesn't hate America, he loves China. That's what Trump was saying. He's like, he doesn't want to bomb America. He loves China.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, we're going to see, but they're not going to allow a pro-peace candidate to get very far.
It just really feels like these guys, either they really want war or they just don't study. Like they just literally don't do your homework.
Right. So it's the default setting. Or both. It's like the easier thing to do.
Or both. Yeah. And like the bit about like studying in order to, present your message as war propaganda, at least that takes some kind of homework. But this sort of laziness of like the politician we saw a couple weeks ago that didn't even know where the Donbass was, like you cannot say shit about the war if you don't know where Donbass is and don't know that it's been raging there since 2014. Then shut up, say nothing about the war, and go back and do your reading and go back and do your homework.
He said, and that politician was like,
I'll look that up.
I'll look that up. I don't know anything about Donetsk. I don't know anything about the Donbass. I don't know anything about genocide, but I'm very pro-peace.
No, but Putin's a madman, so we need to keep going. So this idea, like watching these people say these war rhetoric things, feeling like they don't do their homework, that is like the one thing I cannot abide. You don't know what you're saying. You're just saying political speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Well, and I want to say like the one president that challenged that actually got in, that realized peace and tried to push for peace, was in the 60s. And we know what happened to him.
Yeah.
So they do not want peace in this country.
Right.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And that's why RFK Jr., it's a very interesting candidate right now, and would close military bases around the world. Do you think that they're going to let Robert F. Kennedy Jr. become president? I mean, come on.
No.
Do you think that that's going to happen? And when I say that, what I mean is the deep state, the people that control the donors, the people that control the media, all of it. And I'm not saying that something nefarious is going to happen. I mean, who knows, right? But what I'm saying is that the people that pushed Trump out are the very same people that do not want a pro-peace candidate. Absolutely not, because it would lose them trillions of dollars. And that's all you need to do is follow the money.
I don't know if we can call Kennedy, though, a totally peaceful candidate. He signed off on the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in Congo. Like, he didn't bring war to the United States, North America, but he was involved in that. So
he wasn't president when that happened, but you're talking about JFK. I'm talking about RFK Jr.
Right. No, I know that. But David just said that the one president we had that was pro-peace was in the 60s.
Right. We'll try not to push us further into Vietnam. That's what he's referring to.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about, Patrice Lumumba in Congo, Kennedy wasn't yet hadn't been inaugurated yet. January of 1961. He was assassinated in 1960. Patrice Lumumba. But go ahead, David.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out, like, you could see that it was kind of an escalation of his thinking, because at first he probably thought everything was copacetic, like, hey, this is how it works. But then the more they pushed him to, like, hey, we got to attack Cuba, we got to do this, we got to do that, he's like, wait, what's going on here? Like, he was slowly learning the actual power structure, and he went against that power structure, and they were calling him to, we got to go into Vietnam, and he's like, no, we're not doing it. And then as soon as he was gone, Johnson, right into Vietnam we went.
Yeah.
Wow. I think you're wrong about the assassination, but we can, I don't want to derail this.
63, I think is.
The assassination of
we're talking about a couple
Lumumba?
different assassinations.
Sorry.
Anyway, we've got more news to get to here. And people are pointing out RFK's, support of Israel as well. So I mean, look, if you're completely anti-war, you do not even get close to being elected. You do not, if you're supporting invasions in Syria and attacks on Iran and attacks on the Palestinian people, and I mean, come on, you do not get elected. Anyway, we got more news to get to here on this Wednesday. We're going to talk about the makeover of the U.S. military. You won't believe what the U.S. military is allowing now for soldiers to go through all sorts of gender reassignment surgeries. And hey, you don't even have to be deployed. If you just have to sign a waiver, you don't even have to be deployed because you're going through gender reassignment surgery now. And so, you need that time off. We can't have you in a battle anywhere because you need that time for yourself. That's the U.S. military. Also, the UFO hearing. We're going to get to that in just moments on what is expected next week in Congress as number of whistleblowers come forward and sit down in front of the United States Congress and present evidence that we are going to see for the first time. And I'm very excited about that. But first, if you are an investor and you're looking for an easier way to trade stocks, would you like 16 free stocks right now? Of course you would. Even if you do nothing else with the account, you can open your account with Moomoo by going to redacted.inc/Moomoo, get up to 16 free stocks, and you can trade like a pro with Moomoo. There's no steep learning curve. It has a simple interface. It's easy to use, so even beginners can take advantage of the stock market in no time. Plus, it also offers powerful tools, often reserved for experienced investors, like customizable watch lists and advanced charting capabilities. And now Moomoo has even added a powerful new earnings calendar, so you don't have to hunt and peck trying to find earnings schedules for your favorite stocks. Right now, for a limited time, Moomoo is giving away 16 free stocks when you open your account and you make your initial deposits. Even if you never do anything else with the account, you can get those free stocks. Moomoo has zero commission trades. The app looks amazing on every platform from iOS to Android to Windows and Mac. So here's what you do. Just go to redacted.inc, just redacted.inc/Moomoo. And then open your account, make your initial deposits, and you get those free stocks. And they're giving away, I believe it's a Google and or a Tesla stock right now. One free share of Tesla or Google stock for a limited time right now. So go check them out. Redacted.inc/Moomoo.
All right, I do want to circle back around to this. Patrice Lumumba was assassinated just a few days before Kennedy was inaugurated, but he was consulted by Belgium as the incoming president and did persuade Belgium to send Lumumba to their stronghold in Elizabethville to be executed. He was worried that Lumumba might return to power because of his sort of independence. So
he wasn't president.
He was not president, but he was involved in the decision. They consulted him through the United Nations.
When was he killed? When was he assassinated?
Just 3 days before Kennedy took office.
So January
17th, 1961.
Okay.
So the official reporting shows that he was consulted on this and also authorized Belgium to go and get him. I don't know if he knew that he was going to be tortured as such. But
well, JFK is not clean either. I mean,
right. So I just, I don't know if it's right for us to say who is a fully peaceful person. We talk a lot about the way that we talk about peace on this show. Those of us in our redacted chat or who work for this program, we like to say that we are what's our title? We are non-pacifist peace extremists. So nobody gets a pass. You have to be fully peaceful.
We're making t-shirts.
You can't kill some people, but otherwise be peaceful for your own continent. That it doesn't fly. So I think that most people go through their whole life without starting wars.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd like to think that.
Or killing people. Most people do that. So, we are peace extremists here. Okay, we can move on now. If you are transgendered.
But I was correct. He wasn't president, just to be clear. That's all I said.
Do you want to go another round? We're
I
in the
just
loop
said
now,
because people's like, hey, you're way to go, Clayton. You got it wrong. I'm like, no, I said he wasn't president when that happened. That's all I said. I didn't say he was involved in decision making processes. I just said he wasn't president at the time.
Okay.
So
we can both be right.
Okay. High five.
This is what our marriage counselor calls being in the loop when we're like, you want to go another round?
We don't. And our marriage counselor is our 12-year-old son. No, we don't. We don't have a marriage counselor. All right. Anyway, let's go to the next story.
Okay. All right. Here we go. If you are transgendered, the military may be a good place for you because they will let you out of deployment and pay for your sex change. And they will also let you out of physical fitness standards. Here is a new document, newly released, showing that the U.S. military's policy on transgender members. It includes provisions to skip deployments, receive indefinite waivers on grooming, physical fitness, and drug testing because they're going to pump you full of drugs They have a plan for it. This is the plan. So if you're not trans, you go on deployments, you adhere to physical fitness standards, and you deal with your sad body as it is. But if you're trans, though, you can use the military health care as a clinique counter to make yourself whatever your little heart desires on taxpayer dollars. Now, I'm going to show you this document, but I'd like to sort of frame it this way, like as a thought experiment. Let's think for a second. Why did Chelsea Manning, a trans person who served in the military as Bradley Manning, as a man, have their sentence commuted by Obama for stealing classified documents when Julian Assange still remains in indefinite torture, facing extradition to the United States? Assange did not steal the material he published. Manning admitted to stealing it. He freely admitted it. Did Manning get off easier, maybe, because of gender ideology? Now, I do not want to say that Chelsea Manning got off easy. Chelsea Manning did not. They also were tortured. They also went through hell. And I very much appreciate what Chelsea Manning did. But my question is, would Julian Assange stop being pursued so hard if there was a transgender element? Was one an easier experience than the other? Again, these are both of them have awful experiences and did so, I think, in the public interest. But, and I'm also not saying Chelsea Manning should not have had their sentence commuted. I do believe that they should have. I believe that what they did was brave and in the public interest, and I'm grateful for it. I just think we should think this through. I'm reading Manning's book right now. It is a mix of like memoir about being a gay boy and then a trans woman mixed in with patriotic ideology about not being silent about war crimes. So again, this is just my question, because as I was reading this, I'm thinking about this book I'm reading about Chelsea Manning and their experience being someone with gender dysphoria in the military, and thinking maybe this could have made it a little bit easier. I don't know if the transition had come earlier. So let's look at the policy. They say that now the military must provide what they deem medically necessary transgender hormones and surgery. Well, how do they come up with this medically necessary part? They're using, for their standards, WPATH, which is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health guidelines. Take a look at all of, some of the other sources that they're using, but WPATH is the big one. Now, we've covered WPATH. They do not have scientific basis for their standard of care. Last year, they removed the age limits for all sex change procedures, puberty blockers, breast removal surgery. They have no science behind it. In fact, recently, a judge ordered WPATH to provide the medical basis for their standards, and they are viciously fighting in court. In a recent filing, they argued that they should not have to provide their basic standards because it will harm their organization and because it is their First Amendment privilege. Well, that's interesting. Take a look at this filing. A First Amendment privilege means that they have the freedom of speech, which they do, but they are setting medical standards. And so they're saying, if you knew how we did this, it would harm our organization irreparably. Basically, they admit they make this stuff up. And you can't see how we do it. And we do not want to submit. The judge says that they have to. And they're fighting like hell. So this is what the government's using to make up their trans healthcare policy. Basically all in on gender affirmation, even though there's no data that shows that once you transition somebody, they feel better or they resolve their gender dysphoria. In fact, it shows that when you sex change somebody, their anxiety gets worse. Likely due to the harm you're tearing up their bodies. So along with this gender affirmation is a whole buffet of sex change services offered. Here's what the military says that transgender service members may need, such as speech and voice therapy, cross-sex hormone therapy, laser hair removal, voice feminization surgery, facial contouring, body contouring, breast chest surgery, which means you cut off boobs, genital reassignment, which means you cut off testicles and penises or build one, and the likes of that. Now, laser hair removal and body contouring, they say they don't do it because they don't provide those services. Can you imagine on a military base, like, time for your bikini wax, Roger? Then
I can. I mean, this is what's happening. It's incredibly. You want to think about why the United States military can't get recruitment. And this is their effort, I think, to increase recruitment numbers. Like, we'll take anybody.
I suppose. Now, the body contouring and the laser hair removal, I suppose you could say, like, if I'm a military member, but I'm not trans, I want some laser hair removal. That sounds awesome. Why can't I have it? Right. So they say we don't do this. And so you'd have to seek it off base, and we don't reimburse for that and body contouring. Because otherwise, why wouldn't somebody say, I want some fake boobs, I want a butt lift or whatever. They don't do that.
With that amount of surgery, I mean, they're really missing the opportunity. We could have an army of RoboCops. I mean, there's about almost the same amount of surgery involved.
You could go the opposite direction.
Yeah, you make a good point.
I want to ask a question. Like, if they're recruiting people and they get them in there, and like you have a drill sergeant that walks up and they're like yelling in your face, and you're like, sir, yes, sir. And he's like, no, it's they, yes, they. And if I'm a gender fluid, and if I have a green armband on, it's sir, yes, sir. If I'm wearing blue armband, it's ma'am, yes, ma'am. You know what I mean? It's like, is that where we're going? Is this?
It flips totally. Sergeants? Yeah, it's going to flip totally on the drill sergeants. Like, it's going to flip the opposite now. The drill sergeants can be like, okay, guess I won't open my mouth. I'll lose my job if I say anything now.
Yeah. They can't use they, them. They can use cross-sex pronouns. They can change them, but it can't be they, them, and there's a reason. I'm going to get to it. With all of these things like, oh, I can't really be good at my job because I'm gender dysphoric. So as soon as someone helps me cut off my Adam's apple and speak more feminine, I'll be better. If you've ever read David Goggins' book about all of the military experiences he's had, he is dying on the inside because of all this. Now, this document, again, says they can change their pronouns, but they have to pick a gender. Doesn't have to be the one you're assigned at birth. But once you pick, you have to adhere to that one. And in this agreement that you sign, it says, I agree to not be a she, I'll be a he. And because I've chosen that, I will adhere to those physical fitness standards. It says that, but it doesn't mean it. So I'll tell you about that later, because if I said, okay, I'm a he now, and then I cannot do a pull-up. I go to the gym, but I cannot do it. So I would flunk out, right? Or I would get whatever, like I wouldn't be able to. And there's a way to get an exception for that. Now it says, though, even if you're transgender male, meaning biological female, you still need to get your breast and cervical screenings. And if you're a transgender female, you still need your testicular screenings. Now, this document does warn that hormone therapy comes with all kinds of potential health risks and undesired events. But there are waivers that trans service members use to get exempt from standards of grooming. Here is this waiver, a sample waiver, that you can, wear female or male garments, uniforms, grooming. So, how the military cut for men, if you change your gender, you can be exempt from that. Do they have military grade binders? Like chest binders? I wonder.
You can get them at the surplus store.
Tuck panties, military grade tuck panties.
Oh my God.
That would be something.
Here's your rucksack. Here's your foot locker, and here's your breast binders. Like, that's what the U.S. military, it's, oh my God.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's Kevlar.
Right. Now, as it relates to cross-sex hormones, something we've talked about a lot, this document says many times that these are dangerous and they have side effects, but you can get them if you've gone through all the forms, you've filled out your forms, you've seen all of the therapists, you've proven that you have gender dysphoria. It also says that trans men, so females that want to get men to be men, can expect to get fatter and weaker because when you're on this hormone, it says you can expect an onset of body fat redistribution and decrease of muscle mass within 3 to 6 months. These are soldiers, you guys. You kind of want them to have muscle, right? This is the opposite of super soldier serum. You're supposed to go, if on your screen, you're supposed to go from the guy with the shirt to the guy with no shirt. But instead, we're going from the guy with no shirt to the guy with the shirt.
Yeah, we're going backwards.
We're going the wrong way.
You're going to Gomer Pyle, like on Full Metal Jacket.
We're building the opposite army. Like, we want an army full of weaklings.
What is the opposite of super soldier serum? Cross-sex hormones. That's what it is. Yeah. Let's come up with something better than the super soldier serum is.
But that's a great example. I mean
that's perfect.
It's basically
grammatically
steroid.
It would be sub-soldier serum.
Sub-soldier serum.
I like that.
Sub-soldier. Where are my sub-soldiers at? I don't want to go to war today. I don't want to go to... Good, you don't have to.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Now, the one thing they cannot do is use gender dysphoria as an excuse to get out of the military. So it's kind of funny because they understand that this can be used to someone's advantage. They realize that, you know, sometimes men use it to gain access to women's spaces or to get, you know, an easier deal they think that women have. They're fine with that. You can get out of the war. You can get out of the, you know, fitness standards. You can get all of all that. You can't use it to get out of the military. Take a look at this. Gender dysphoria alone is not grounds to justify or support, you know, leaving the military, basically. Now, you can get out of deployment, though. Take a look at this, is that you have up to 300 days to go through your sex change, after which you'll be evaluated. And if you can convince somebody you're still not doing so well, you still want to transition more, or you're not doing well on this medicine, which nobody does well on this medicine, the doctors can then extend this non-deployable status. You can also request... Go ahead.
Does that come out of their pay, or do we pay for that? Like, is that something we're like,
this is paid time. This is paid time.
Wow.
You're not on like any kind of administrative leave or anything like that. You have 300 days. You can also request exemption to physical fitness tests permanently, even though when you change your sex in the DEERS form, you say you'll adhere to the gendered fitness test, but then you can opt out of all fitness tests. Here's an exemption policy for like grooming, fitness testing. You can opt out of drug abuse testing because you're on heavy duty drugs if you're on cross-sex hormones, as well as, you know, you now don't have to use the bathroom of your assigned sex. But once they're fully transitioned, why not require them to meet the minimum standards of fitness given the danger of the job? Doesn't being in good shape help keep you safe if your job is physically demanding, like fighting, combat, stuff like that? The problem is it's just not possible to allow, you can't have both things. You can't chop up someone's genitals and breasts and slim down their shoulders and put them on something that causes muscle loss, and then also allow them to be on sustained use of hormones that cause headaches, memory loss, weight gain, osteoporosis, teeth that shed enamel or cracked, degenerative spinal discs, painful joints, radical mood swings, seizures, migraines, and suicidal thoughts, fibromyalgia, fertility problems, and cognitive issues. You can't adhere to physical standards, be in tip-top shape, and be doing that to a human body. Those things are mutually exclusive. You would think, you know, that the military wants a soldier that is not having those experiences, but I guess they do. Here's an example of something that was posted today on Libs of TikTok. As I was thinking about this popped up. This is a biological male who is transitioning, waiting for his paperwork to come in. So while he's waiting for his paperwork, he has to still dress and act like a man. And then at the end of so he tells you how he deals with this, how he copes with this by putting on these sort of feminine prosthesis that make him feel feminine. And then he can get on these hormones. It's about 2 minutes. Take a watch.
Hey y'all, so today I'm going to make a video showing how I cope with gender dysphoria while in uniform. If you don't know, when you're an active duty soldier who is transitioning genders, you have to go by standards that align with your gender in CAC and DEERS until that is changed. This means that because my gender is a male in CAC and DEERS, I cannot present as a female in uniform. I have a few ways that I find help me cope with my gender dysphoria while on duty, and I'd like to share them. I'm going to be honest, they're not a lot, but they do help me. The first thing I do is wear clear nail polish. According to regulation, men are allowed to wear clear nail polish while on duty. When I'm in uniform, this makes me feel a bit more feminine because my hands feel pretty when my nails are painted. The second thing I do is wear feminine scents. There is no regulation for what scents you can and can't wear. Pretty self-explanatory this one. Smell feminine, feel feminine. I also like to put on a lip balm because,
oh my gosh,
well, it's not a gloss or anything. Unchapped lips are pretty. The last thing I like to do is put a smile on my face because there is nothing more beautiful than confidence. Look, I know it's not a lot, but that's because there's not a lot you can do to be in regulation and present as your identified gender while in uniform. But this is what gets me through the day, and if you're a trans soldier, I hope it helps you. Hey y'all, my name is Private Johnson. I'm a soldier of trans experience in the United States Army. Today is my first day of starting HRT, so without further ado.
Okay,
My
so
friend
we don't
got
need
me
to
these
play this
dumbbell-
anymore because what he's going to do now is take estradiol and I can't remember the name of the other one, the one that blocks the male hormones, and then estradiol is what brings up the female hormones. Estradiol can cause breast cancer, genital bleeding, stroke, pulmonary embolism, liver disease. This is all according to Pfizer's own website on this drug. We know how forthcoming Pfizer is about adverse events to their drugs, but they're admitting this. This is a healthy soldier about to become an unhealthy soldier on taxpayer money. Now, the painting of the nails, none of that bothers me. It's until you get to something that's going to hurt you that I feel bothered about this. I would be all about if we wanted to lessen our military, if we were a peaceful country, but we're not. And we're out there warmongering in the world, all the while weakening the bodies of our military. Is it any wonder that enrollment is so low? Record low enrollment numbers. This was according to the Wall Street Journal just today. So is it fair to these people to not equip them properly for their job? Is it fair to make some people still adhere to physical fitness standards and not others because of ideology? Is it fair to give young people poison that will hurt them and not leave us safe with an army that is literally busy getting their balls and boobs chopped off? So cancel Captain America. He is just too fit and cis. The military doesn't need anybody that can do this. Yeah, had to.
I know it's your favorite.
He's also too patriotic for the military.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. Okay, so let me know what you think of this in the chat. Is this fair? Is this a good thing to do? Are you happy with this? With
A
your
lot of people
taxpayer
said this is
dollars?
disgusting in the chat. Wolf Solo says this is disgusting. It's awful, awful. Okay, we're done. Come on, surrender now while we're ahead.
I have a question.
Violet says in the chat, come on, Redacted, this is not informative.
No? Okay.
Okay, we just laid out a whole
Sure is.
slew of... Okay.
Do they still shave the heads of everyone, and can you color it?
I don't know.
Shave the heads, yeah. I don't know. We'll get you the uniform code so you can see about enlisting. No, you.
I think she's past the age.
Yeah, you get the age regression.
Yeah, they
stuff.
wouldn't want me now. My steak gas.
They'd be like, put your hand down, soldier. You don't ask questions here.
That's shameful is what it is.
All right. Well, let us know what you think of this. And if we have any interpretations you may not agree with, let us know what you think of that in the chat, or any that you do. And if you are an active military member or a veteran, what you think of this. If you have spent your life trying to adhere to certain physical fitness standards or grooming standards, and you feel like, well, that's not fair, I'd love to hear it.
Brooke in our chat says, I do want to know about this. So thank you, Brooke. Thank you. We're trying to keep, well, the mainstream media is not going to cover the story.
Literally about national security.
Yeah, it's a national security story about degrading the United States military by basically saying you can get out of service going to a war front or active training, basic training, or other deployments if you're in gender reassignment surgery. This is how far our military has fallen in the United States.
And in preparation for you to come back, here's something that causes muscular weakness. So
paid for by the big pharma. Yeah.
I bet you this will get abused too, because there's going to be some people like, if I go into the military, I can get all this for free on the taxpayer.
Yeah.
And then just like somehow opt out after.
You can get it in Oregon though on Medicare. So
well, yeah.
So you
I was
don't
gonna
have
say
to
that
go
list
that
that
far.
you read, the list that you read of all the procedures on the Seattle Children's Hospital website, that stuff is covered. Children's Hospital.
Even
by
laser hair
insurance.
removal?
All of it.
Oh my gosh. Wow. All right. Well, we have more news to get to. We're going to talk about these UFO disclosures. We have a guest coming up who's going to give us an update on the Dutch farmer revolt and how that's come along, whether or not that is something that we have progress on, or is it coming to a food chain near you? It might. So we're going to get to all of that. But first, we want to talk to you about our friends over at Genucel. Because ladies, if you're looking in the mirror and you see some dark spots, they're not going to go away on your own. We want to introduce you to the dark spot corrector from Genucel, right in time for summer. The dark spot corrector, with not one but 3 cutting-edge ingredients, goes to work fast to target sunspots, dark spots, liver spots, even old discoloration both on your hands and face. You'll be amazed at how quickly you'll see results. You can enjoy your summer sun, beach, and barbecues without embarrassing spots, because with Genucel, you'll see results or your money back, no questions asked. So right now, go to Genucel.com and get your dark spot corrector with the new Genucel Most Popular package, now featuring summer essentials like the best-selling Ultra Retinol Moisturizer. Retinol is one of the ingredients my dermatologist assures me is something that must be included in best practices of skincare. So with a powerful retinol alternative for safe and use in the summer sun, because a lot of times retinol, you have to avoid the sun. So there's a retinol moisturizer that you can use into the sun. That's kind of great. So visit Genucel.com/promo right now for these amazing summer essentials and save over 70% off Genucel's Most Popular package. So don't wait. Order now, free shipping, free returns, and the best luxury skincare you've ever used, all 70% off. So again, that's Genucel.com/promo. Genucel.com/promo. All orders will include a mystery luxury gift while supplies last. Genucel.com/promo.
Well, for decades, it seems, we've been inching along towards disclosure as members of the military come forward and admit that, yes, they've worked on UFO reverse engineering programs. They've seen it. They've witnessed it. Members of law enforcement have come forward. Thousands of eyewitnesses, but still inches every year. Until now, it appears the United States Congress is ready to make a giant leap forward on UFO disclosure. And no one follows this more closely. No one is perhaps one of the better researchers in the world on this subject, Dr. Michael Salla, author of countless books on the subject. I encourage you to read all of them. He writes over at exopolitics.org. Dr. Salla, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Clayton, for having me.
My pleasure. And so we've got this bombshell amendment from Senator Chuck Schumer, of all people. This is not some low-level senator, which is an amendment to the Defense Authorization Act, right? Putting money in the defense authorization budget. And there's a draft version that he has put forward called the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon Disclosure Act of 2023. And it has overwhelming bipartisan support. Republicans and Democrats are on board with this Disclosure Act. This could be the moment we've been waiting for. What does this act do? Let's just get into the nitty-gritty of what this act specifically does, and then I want to have a deeper discussion about the broader implications of this, Doctor.
Sure. Well, what the act does is that it puts on the discussion within the U.S. Congress any file, any information concerning non-human intelligence, any debris, any artifacts, technologies derived from UAPs connected to this non-human intelligence. And it puts that under the jurisdiction of this proposed review board that is going to look at all of that data and then decide how much of it is going to be released to the general public. And one of the most important aspects of this proposed act is that it reports directly to the President of the United States. It's very unlike the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office that presently reports to the Undersecretary for Defense for Intelligence and Security. He's a mid-level bureaucrat, and between him and the Secretary of Defense, at any point, any kind of UAP information can be blocked. And you can see that already with the Arrow office in terms of it saying, well, we have no data on whether or not there is any extraterrestrial component to the UAPs. But this proposed amendment by Senator Schumer actually says that they have good reasons for believing that data on UAPs have been withheld from Congress, that the Freedom of Information Act has failed, that the mandatory declassification process, which is in place for ensuring any kind of information relating to UAPs, UFOs, is eventually released, that has also led to a logjam where the information hasn't come forward. So this proposed amendment bypasses all of that and puts it in the hands of ultimately the president, who is going to be the ultimate arbiter of any information that this review board has, which is going to be held up or released to the general public.
It is amazing. I mean, and I think for most Americans to sit there and say, so Congress is literally asking for disclosure, putting it inside of the defense bill. There's no way that this is going to pass. This sounds too good to be true. But in fact, there is broad bipartisan support. Maybe some minor revisions will unfold, but mostly this will probably pass intact. And so what does it mean? Who will this impact specifically? Would it be these large defense companies, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, et cetera, that will be forced to come forward?
Yeah, well, one of the provisions in this UAP Act is that it asserts eminent domain, which means that any individual or any corporation, any entity that has in its possession any kind of UAP that's related to non-human intelligence, and it spells out, it gives a definition for non-human intelligence, and it's quite clear we're talking about extraterrestrial life, that any entity, corporation, individual that has anything related to that is obliged to surrender information about that technology to this review board, and it in turn will give a report that ultimately gets to the hands of the president. But what it means is that the major aerospace companies that I've been able to, through my kind of years of research into the secret space programs, have been secretly building anti-gravity vehicles of different designs, different sizes, for deployment in these secret space programs in deep space operations, that those corporations will now have to report on the technologies that they've been reverse engineering to this review board. And that makes it possible now for all of this to be finally disclosed. And the big winner and loser are going to be the corporations. On the one hand, they lose because they no longer control these technologies in these compartmented programs that they've been running in tandem with the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. But on the other hand, they're big winners because, rather than build 4, 5, or 6 squadrons of these craft, of these anti-gravity vehicles for intelligence operations or for covert activities in space, now they're going to build 300, 400 squadrons of these for deployment into space for the Space Force and for Space Command. So, that's why I think ultimately the major corporations will love this, because it means that they get to build the 300, 400 squadrons of flying triangles, rectangle-shaped platforms, and the cigar-shaped craft that insiders have been reporting for decades now, that they get to build fleets of these, not just 1 or 2 squadrons here and there.
That's, I think, what my audience maybe might miss in all of this, which is why would all these members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, be on board with this? Well, I think we all know that many of them are in the pockets of these big defense companies. If you look at their outlays, the amount of money that they donate to these different politicians, overwhelmingly, almost every politician in Washington receives an enormous amount of money from these defense companies. And so it all makes sense, right? When you think about it in terms of money, they are going to make a lot of money, these defense companies, because now this will not be hidden. They won't have to go to such great lengths to hide it. It won't be small operations. This would be massive out here in the public. Congress is signing off on it. It'll be in front of all of us. And now it won't be in the shadows anymore. And they can say, yes, we've had alien craft for many years. We've been reverse engineering it for many years. We've had to keep it quiet. It's been on the black books now. Now it'll be a part of the main defense budget. And instead of being $886 billion a year, it'll be $1.5 trillion is how much they'll spend on this new defense budget. Am I wrong about this?
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, they have been generating a large budget off the books for building these crafts secretly. But now, because it goes through Congress and because these aerospace companies are going to build this for the military-industrial complex, you're going to have hundreds of these craft being built, and so the Congress is going to have to expand the Department of the Pentagon budget. And this is something that goes back to President Eisenhower. I mean, as people well are aware, in 1961, Eisenhower gave his famous military-industrial complex speech. What's not well known is that Eisenhower, in his initial draft, he included Congress in that. It was always going to be about the military-industrial congressional complex, and that's something that's been known, that Congress is married to the military-industrial complex. And people like Chuck Schumer, Marco Rubio, Kirsten Gillibrand, while they may present themselves as independent and they're doing this for the common good, really it's because they've been given the green light by the military-industrial complex, because they are the most powerful lobby. I mean, they eclipse the pharmaceutical lobby, they eclipse the oil industry lobby. The big boy in town, the 800-pound gorilla in Congress is the military-industrial complex, and they're given the thumbs up to this. And yeah, they want this legislation to go forward because they're champing at the bits, not only to build, massive fleets of anti-gravity spacecraft, not so much to deal with extraterrestrials, because this is the paradox here, because extraterrestrials are a known quantity to the military-industrial complex. They know about them. They've made deals. They've been reverse engineering their craft for decades now. But the big unknown is China. China is building fleets of anti-gravity spacecraft of their own. And only a week ago, there was a very important paper released showing that China's naval shipbuilding capacities exceed that of the Pentagon by a factor of 200 to 1. I mean, that's astounding that they put that out. And the reason they put that out, I believe, is to alert Congress to the fact that if China is outspending US Navy in terms of shipbuilding by a factor of 200 to 1, what is China doing secretly for its space navy? And that is something that really worries members of Congress and the Pentagon, because China is very opaque when it comes to how it's using its military spending. Its economy now exceeds the US in terms of PPP, and soon it will exceed it in terms of the nominal gross national product. And so China is already a superpower economically, and they are quickly catching up. So the Pentagon knows they have to bring this out into the open source so that they can get Congress to fully fund this secret space program that's now being slowly incorporated into Space Force and into Space Command, so that they can stay well ahead of China for decades to come.
There are some people in our audience, and not just my audience, but who will not believe anything until they're standing there looking at a piece of evidence, a craft or a body or something. Ross Coulthart the other day said, in a very short period of time, there's going to be a revelation from Congress which makes this evidence incontrovertible. And so do you think that as part of this disclosure, that members of Congress will come forward with incontrovertible evidence showing a video of a UFO? Here it is. Here's the craft in front of us. This is what we've been reverse engineering, or a body, or something like that, that would make even the grandest skeptic say, okay, there it is.
We're moving towards that, definitely. I mean, what we have now with this UAP Disclosure Act is the framework by which that can happen. And it's going to go through the legislative process, and by the end of this year, the National Defense Authorization Act for 2024 will be passed, and this will become law. And so sometime next year, you can expect that under the provisions of this law, you're going to have exactly that. The files showing actual recovered extraterrestrial spacecraft that are being studied and reverse engineered, those kinds of files and videos will be released, or at least the president will have the authority to tell this review board to release that. But in the meantime, what you're going to have is you're going to have more files being released, more videos being released, and next week on July 26th, you're going to have the House committee that's responsible for review and reform, the House Committee for Review and Reform, holding a hearing where they have insiders coming forward to talk about what they know of these reverse engineering programs. So you're going to have a congressional hearing for the first time, interviewing witnesses. It's not going to be government experts or scientific experts. You're going to actually have whistleblowers for the first time being asked in Congress what they know about these reverse engineering programs that are being studied in Congress. And you might actually have some files being released. So that next week is going to be, I think, going to be unprecedented. And that's just going to set the stage for more revelations, more congressional hearings, not only in the House of Representatives, but also in the Senate.
Well, I think it's safe to say, we won't reveal it here, but there are some videos that you and I have personally seen, which I think the rest of the country is going to see next week, and just gives me chills to think about. And I think it's going to be jaw-dropping for people to see this in front of Congress. So I, for one, think we're not at inches anymore. I think we are seeing major leaps forward. Even if the motivations are money, at the end of the day, for a lot of this coming forward, I think this is finally what it could open up for us in terms of healthcare and energy, 0-point energy, and all sorts of other things could be tremendous and earth-changing. I think it could help millions of people around the world who deal with famine, food supply shortage, all sorts of problems. I think this could have tremendous effects on that. Any final thoughts on that piece, Dr. Sala?
Yes, I think that's really where we get the most hope from this legislation coming forward, is that these free energy, these anti-gravity propulsion systems that insiders have been talking about for years, that they are going to be released, that these pharmaceutical or these alternative advanced health remedies using holographic healing, using electromagnetic healing is going to obliterate the pharmaceutical industry. It won't stand a chance against that. But this is going to be necessary because space travel requires advanced space medicine because space is a very harsh environment. If you're going to have people, if you're going to have pilots and crew manning hundreds of squadrons of anti-gravity spacecraft patrolling the moons of Jupiter that are all under Space Command, they're not going to pop pills if they get sick under radiation. They're going to need to have advanced holographic healing technologies, and those have existed for decades. So that is going to be now made open source. It's going to be released, and that I think is going to have tremendous repercussions for throughout the planet, because people will now have access to real health technologies, alternative energy and propulsion technologies. It's going to revolutionize our world. And so this act is very, very important. It sets the foundations for this revolution in health, transportation, and energy, and of course in military affairs for decades to come.
Yeah, and just when you sit back and you think, my father shouldn't have passed away with cancer last year, because we already have the technology in place that could have totally eradicated that, but they've kept it under wraps and kept it hidden from us in order to continue the biopharmaceutical complex and the massive money that they make. I'm excited to see what happens next week in Congress. Dr. Sala, we hope you'll be back on that. We'll definitely be covering every angle of it here, even, and I hope to eliminate all the skeptics out there. That's my goal. That's my mission, to eliminate all the skeptics. Open up your eyes, because it's happening right before us. Dr. Sala, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Clayton.
Thanks, Doc. And thanks to all of you for the comments. I love reading the comments. It's my favorite. It's my favorite pastime. No, I love. One guy said, "I love how angry certain people get about this," and he was enjoying the anger of it all. And I'm just like, okay, I like the compartmentalization of it. Like that the people can just like they can literally block this big story, one of the largest stories of all time. They can like block it out and compartmentalize it. Like, it's too big. I don't want to think about it and it scares me. So I'm just going to call it bullshit.
So from a journalistic standpoint, you're not like, I want this story to be this. You want people to care about what the story is.
Yeah, I want to know. I want to know the details of it. And here's a good question. Here's the thing. I heard a journalist ask this earlier today. Lockheed Martin, if it is true that they do in fact have, which the reporting suggests absolutely this is the case. Whistleblowers have said this is the case, that they have alien craft that they've reverse engineered for decades. Lockheed Martin, just one of the examples. And shareholders don't know about it. And you've been lying to shareholders all of these years. That is a big, big deal. That is criminal. I mean, that is of the highest level. So if they arguably one of the biggest and most important pieces of technology of all time, you have and don't reveal to your shareholders who are investors in your company. I mean, not only just an SEC violation. I never thought of it but like that's how it could become their undoing. Because if they're forced to testify and actually they come forward now under this new law and have to disclose what they've been working on, and you didn't tell us, and certain people are investors in your company, that is a massive criminal scheme. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was just reading just reading yesterday. It was a Reddit thread where somebody was pointing out like there was a kind of a belief that this is really that this bill has less to do with like disclosure and more to do with clawing back all that technology that the government has like let these people have and they've been using, and so that it's like it has this person was postulating that it's really just a clawback, that like the government just wants that technology back.
Interesting.
So I thought that was an interesting,
yeah, like the nationalization of it. I think in many ways that might be the case. So, and they're on board because they're going to make a ton of money. So it's not fake, guys. Trust me. And the interview that we have coming out later this week, it's jaw dropping. So wait till you see this a little bit later this week. We've got more news to get to here on this Wednesday. We're going to talk about the Dutch farmer revolt and what happens with the World Economic Forum and the globalists. They've got a new target now. Who is the new target?
Everybody. Sorry to give you that, give that away,
okay.
but yeah, it's you. So you need to watch this next segment.
All right. But first, it's no secret. I mean, we are seeing the devaluing of the U.S. dollar. We just had a report out today on the devaluing of the U.S. dollar. People can't. I watched a whole report about how like a six-figure salary now is like it's nothing for people. I mean, it's really it's very difficult for them to get mortgages, to pay their bills. Like this is what we're seeing right now is the devaluing of the currency. I saw another report saying the value of the U.S. dollar compared to the Great Depression right now, it's worse now than in the Great Depression. The buying power of the U.S. dollar is worse now than it was during the Great Depression. So wrap your head around that. And that's why I'm such a big investor of gold and silver and real estate, actual tangible assets. And our friends over at Lear Capital can actually help you get set up if you wanted to convert a portion of your U.S. dollars that are losing value. And if you want to buy gold coins, silver bars, gold bars, etc., you can store it locally at your house, your safe or whatever, or offsite in a storage facility, whatever you prefer. We prefer a storage facility for precious metals. A lot of smart investors do that as well. You don't want to have that liability laying around. But anyway, they can help you get set up and see if it's a fit for you just by going to their website. You can go to LearRedacted.com, get their free gold and silver kit, and just like educate yourself on it. Does it make sense for you and your family to put a bit of your savings that you've had sitting in US dollars, converting that to an asset that has survived for 5,000 years and has sustained wars, famines, collapse of governments, and everything else? I like those odds. And that's why we have a strong portion of our portfolio in precious metals. So our friends at Lear Capital can help you get set up. They're a US-based company. They have 25 years experience, 24 hours to review your purchase. Like if you decide to buy $1,000 worth of gold coins or silver coins, you can say a day later, you're like, you know what? I like the US dollar. I'm not going to do that. Well, then you don't have to buy it. You can do whatever you want. So go to LearRedacted.com and get the free gold and silver kit. You can also call their 800 number as well, 1-800-613-3557, and talk to one of their team members about it and tell them you heard about them from us. So call their 800 number, 1-800-613-3557. Yeah, and we the people in the chat just saying silver is now back over $25. Yeah, I mean, silver to me is one of the I love silver. I mean, we buy gold, but we just bought a lot of silver because I really think it's cheap. I mean, it's cheap, and the demand for silver is off the charts. It's in every electronic device. So that's why I'm a big fan of silver. I think the cheap price of it right now and the trajectory of silver is really, really good. Anyway, call them today, 1-800-613-3557.
Well, what is the state of the Dutch farmer protest movement? Something we've been covering at length. Just as a refresher, the Dutch farmers have been pushing back against government efforts to shut down farms and implement, in my opinion, nonsensical environmental standards. Farmers have stood up in protest, driving tractors into cities, making themselves heard. But is it working? Jim Ferguson is a former parliamentary candidate and a businessman and entrepreneur who has been outspoken on this issue. He joins us to talk about this. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Natalie.
Yes, first-time guest, but someone that I've followed a lot because in my book, you have a reputation on Twitter for being a truth teller. And so I appreciate that you're speaking out about this. Can you tell me what you think the current state of these protests are? Did they work? Are they accomplishing anything? And why do you think they were there in the first place?
Well, I think they most definitely have worked, Natalie, because they have garnered so much international support now. When you see thousands of people coming out in tractors and other farm machinery to block roads, to protest, it's inevitable attention to it. But actually, they have had an indirect effect on the Dutch government as well, because Mark Rutte was the Prime Minister there, and his government has collapsed just literally within a week and a half ago. And it collapsed because it was a coalition government. And he, of course, being connected to the World Economic Forum, was attempting to bring in huge numbers of illegal immigration as well. And his coalition partner said, no, we can't have any more of this. And the government actually collapsed. But that was as a direct result of the farmers' protests standing up and drawing attention to what they were trying to do to them.
Now, one of the things about Mark Rutte's resignation that gave me pause was seeing him in Telegram videos with Zelensky at the NATO summit last week, which made me wonder, does this mean that the policies that drove him out of politics in the Netherlands might be coming to other NATO countries? Is that something that you worry about, or do you think that this might be buried once and for all?
Oh, no, it's definitely on its way. It's coming to the United States of America. We've seen that with John Kirby, who's the special envoy for climate change to Joe Biden. We've seen that happening, starting to happen in Canada, and it's going to happen in the UK. They're not going to give up that easily until we effectively ensure that our governments are no longer run by World Economic Forum placement. And unfortunately, Joe Biden, John Kerry are part of the World Economic Forum, as is Justin Trudeau in Canada, Richie Sunak and his cabinet here in the United Kingdom. And of course, we see the same in France with Emmanuel Macron and Mark Rutte, of course. So we need to ensure that we are putting a stop to that. And the only way we can do it, Natalie, is for farmers and communities, people who are patriotic about their own national sovereign states, standing up together and saying no more.
Now, can you flesh out this World Economic Forum control mechanism a little bit better? Because a lot of times people hear this and they think, that's not real, that's tenuous, we don't really know. But then we do see power grabs that disenfranchise things that we need to live off of. Fuel, farming, all of those types of things. So maybe you can flesh that out a little bit more for anyone who's just like, oh, I'm not willing to go there yet.
Well, I think we all thought that the World Economic Forum were just a sort of a bit of a club in Davos where they used to meet for business people, industrialists, people that were quite wealthy, and they were just trying to get some solutions to the world's problems. But it's become much more apparent that there is something far more insidious going on. We've seen the chairman, German Klaus Schwab, who has openly bragged about having penetrated, that's his own words, penetrated the cabinets of most of the Western Hemisphere, and indeed some in the East. So he's not kidding. He's quite proud of the fact that he now has influence with his own people in positions of power and authority within respective governments. And one thing that we need to be aware of, Natalie, is these are globalists and they want a one world government that they control. So the independent national sovereign states are an obstacle to that. And one thing that we are seeing and watching very closely there is because they're using a tool to weaken individual countries through mass illegal immigration. Of course, that's what's led to the collapse of Mark Rutte's government in Holland.
Right. Now, the farmer citizen movement, though, was one of the things that helped to succeed at pushing back. But the European Union already approved a plan to buy out livestock farm and force these farmers to sign a promise not to start farms anywhere else. That's still happening, right? Despite protests. So that bit of it is going to implode. Is there anything you think that can be done about that?
Well, it's actually really quite serious, Natalie. I'm glad you brought that point up, because what the European Union have now gone and said to these Dutch farmers is that if you resist the Rutte government, they said this prior to the collapse of his government, they said, if you resist us, we are going to stop you farming anywhere else in the European Union member states. Now, you have to remember, these people are farmers. That's all they know. It's all they've ever done. So that threat is a very real threat. It's
right. It's not like they
undemocratic.
know how to go and farm in Africa then. It's regional.
Well, it's European wide, but I mean, you know, it's a big threat to them. If they dare to resist, Natalie, then they're going to get stopped from farming anywhere within the member states. So it's a very, very serious thing. And I think that what's happened with the Dutch government actually, though, might be the crack in the army that we need to see. You know, if they're now seen to be getting pushed back, it will galvanize further support, and it's going to mean that people will regain their courage and their momentum. And I think we're starting to see evidence of that in Holland right now. I spoke to Mr. Roebels, who is the leader of the Farmers Defence Force in Holland. They have thousands of members. They're very organised. And what I would like to see, Natalie, happening is that ranchers in America, farmers in the UK, food producers, wherever they might be, start to join forces and start to resist this takeover, because ultimately our food supplies are what they're really after. The World Economic Forum is all about control of people, whether it's through CBDCs or whether it's through the food. And if they control the food, then they control all of us.
Right. So this is something that we all can use as a cautionary tale and band together in ways that maybe are out of reach from politicians. And so what you think is just pay attention to even the small movements where you live so it doesn't get this far. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think that there are three things to think about. We've got the strategic, the tactical, and the operational command, if you like. So the local people are the sort of the operational side of things. The tactical might be the more regional type of organizations that are going to be overseeing this. And the strategic are the truly international and global efforts to coalesce and get people together. And I'm talking to people internationally in Canada, the States, obviously the UK, Australia and New Zealand now, to actually do that. So there is a big momentum that's building. And I think you're going to find that people are just at that point where they're going to fight back now and say, no more, we can't allow this to happen to our farms and our communities.
I guess what scares me is that when a movement like the farmer citizen movement gains power, we have come to expect that there'll be a more powerful mechanism that subverts it. And that's my fear. Do you share that fear? And who would it be, and how do we make them stop?
I do share that concern, Natalie, because we have to understand who and what we're actually dealing with. These people, in my opinion, are megalomaniacs and really quite insane, and they will not easily give up on their grip on power. You have to remember, though, Natalie, that we are billions strong, and there's only a few thousand of them that control all the wealth and the property and the power at the moment. But I think if we can start to turn this around, and I think Holland is most definitely, from my point of view, the frontline battleground. We need to support them there. We need to draw attention to what's going on. But we also need to be prepared in our own respective countries to say, if you are a WEF-affiliated politician, we simply will not vote for you, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, Labour Party or Conservative here in the UK, or wherever you are. We've got to say, no, we want our politicians to serve our own countries, not a German chairman in the World Economic Forum.
Right. Well, thank you for bringing us your take on this and for all the speaking out that you do about this. You can find Jim on Twitter at Jim Ferguson UK. And anywhere else you'd like to point us to follow along with your work?
Well, I'm very grateful to Elon Musk in Twitter. The rest of the channels are usually very highly censored, but I would just pay tribute to Redacted because I watch your show all the time. It's fantastic what you and Clayton do, and thanks so much indeed for having me on. It's been a real pleasure to see you and to talk to you.
Well, come back anytime.
Okay, Natalie, thank you.
That does it for us tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. Thank you for liking this video, sharing it with your friends. Remember, you can do the same thing with the newsletter. Subscribe. It's free at redacted.inc. Tell your friends about it. That's also free. And by supporting the show, you support us and independent journalism. We will be back tomorrow. We'll be in your inbox in the morning, and then you get us in broadcast form in the afternoon. So there's plenty to go around. So make sure you stay tuned. We really appreciate you being here. See you tomorrow, everybody.